Welcome back to Briggs on Books, our international talk show where we talk to authors from all over the world. Um, Important book coming up right now, Titans of Capital. And not only do we have the book, but we have the author to help us explain it to us, why we would want to read it and things like that. I want to read it because I'm a nerd for this kind of stuff. Welcome, Peter Phillips, the author. Uh, Titans of Capital. Tell us about the book, Peter.
Well, thanks for having me on, Mike. It's a great honor. Um, Titans of Capital is a follow-up book to a book I did 5 years ago called Giants. And Giants was about the top trillion-dollar capital investment companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, and those. At that time, 5 years ago, there were 17 that had $1 trillion worth, and they collectively managed $41 trillion worth of capital, which I thought was pretty serious
Yeah.
concentration of wealth. Um, what's happened in the past 5 years is it's literally doubled. There's now 31 giants. They control $83 trillion worth of capital. And that got me to be too many to really do a good sociological analysis. So I just went with the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
The top 10 control $50 trillion worth of capital. It's double what it was 5 years ago. Now that's free flowing money. That's money that the richest people in the world, one half of 1%, 40 million billionaires and multimillionaires, they give that money to these investment companies to invest for them. So capital investment, they're trying to seek a, 8, 9, 10% return annually on this income, on this wealth. And one of their biggest problems, they have more capital than they've got safe places to put it.
Mm.
So certainly in the West, there's this concentrated capital now over 100 trillion that is excess money held by the half of 1% of the people, and they invest in everything. So anything that can get a return that includes alcohol, tobacco, firearms, armaments, things that hurt our society, and they'll do speculative investments too, like the subprime mortgage fiasco was directly related to their overinvestment there.
Mm.
So that is a continuing problem for them. And if we look at what who they are, this capital is one of the is the what if the government says we're trying to protect our special interests. That's what they mean. So our military bases worldwide, our intelligence services, the U.S. government is protecting, and that they see that as their job, is to protect this centrally owned capital of the world. And the West, particularly the U.S., has this massive amounts. China, which is a rival to the U.S. economically, they have like 5% of the capital in the world. So
Mm.
they have a much lower level in terms of investment capital. So this money is free floating and can be used in a variety of places. And the more concentrated it becomes, that means the less is available to the rest of us.
That's right.
So we're seeing this massive inequality occurring in the world today. There's 700 million people who live on less than $2.15 a day, which is the starvation rate that the UN says is extreme poverty. And that's gone up in the past 5 years. The only place it hasn't gone up is in China,
Mm.
which is kind of interesting because they still have several hundred million people living on $5 a day, but proudly have said that they've eliminated extreme poverty in their country, which
Mm.
is true. And that extreme poverty results in the deaths of 20,000 people daily
Daily.
in the world.
Wow.
They die from starvation, easily curable diseases, in the millions. And that to me is sinful. I'm an ex-Catholic, and I think in terms of sin, that's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just absolutely wrong to have that many people dying daily when it doesn't have to be happening. There's more than adequate wealth, there's more than adequate food in the world to feed everybody. It's just not distributed well, and it's used for profit making. The biggest food companies like Cargill make massive profits off grains and stuff, and people can't afford to survive. They can't feed their children.
Now, this is a post COVID book.
Yeah, no, the book just came out
Yeah.
this year. I worked on it for 2 years.
And you talk about the
And
idea of concentrated wealth. There's so much wealth that they have no place to invest it, and is that who's buying up all the houses and commercial properties?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, any place that they can put capital, that they're going to get a return. That's where it's going to go. And that's a really huge problem in the world today, is this continued concentration of wealth. And so when we look at these 10 capital investment companies, they're managed by 117 people. So these are the people I call the titans. Titans, of course, are the Greek gods of power and control in the world. And so these are the titans are these 117 men, mostly men, but a third women, who are primarily based in Europe and the U.S. Two-thirds are in the U.S. And they're in 21 other countries. They're 86% white. There's about 15 or 16 of them that are people of color in various countries. But it's a concentration of people. They all know each other or know of each other. They go to Davos together, half of them do. And they influence governments, all of their governments, in terms of policy and support for their continued capital concentration.
Yeah.
And they say, well, we're acting as fiduciaries for these people who give us the money. Well, in a sense, that's true. But, they represent the 0.5% of the world's elite, the richest people in the world. And those resources are not being used for human betterment, for the elimination of poverty and starvation of children. I find that pretty wrong. And I think that we need to let them know what we think about. So in the book, I identify all 117 by name,
Nice.
their occupation, what companies they're with. And it's kind of doing that. On average, they're 55 to 70 years of age. They have 5 to 20 million in assets. A few are billionaires, and the richest is 60 billion. But there's such a small number of people, and they control this huge amount of wealth where it will be invested. That we could talk to them. They have names and addresses and phone numbers, and we should be contacting them and saying this needs to be shared.
Right.
Just a few percent of that vast investment money could eliminate starvation in the world.
Now tell me about your sample or your group. These 117, they're top 10% of the top 100 investment firms, or where are they coming from? You said there's 40 million millionaires, and so the 117, where are they?
The 117, the number one is Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock.
BlackRock.
And he comes out of a middle-class working family. His mother worked for the state of California. His father had a small business in L.A. He got an MBA from UCLA, ends up working for First Boston as an investment advisor, and makes really good decisions about where people should invest. It makes them a lot of money. And so he is supported through Blackstone to develop his own company, BlackRock. And they have become the number one in the world. They handle $10 trillion worth of capital, doubled in the last 5 years. And he's now a billionaire, newly anointed by Forbes. So he's in Forbes' list of billionaires this year. And that he's on the advisory board for the World Economic Forum. He's on the Business Roundtable. He's on the International Business Council. He's on the Council of Foreign Relations. He's a trustee for NYU. Very, very influential, powerful guy. And he's typical he gives to both parties, but he's primarily a Democrat, but he gives to both parties, and as they all tend to. So top the Titans are supported by both parties in the government, and they want to keep it that way. I mean, they are the special interests of the U.S. government is to protect capital and capital investment worldwide.
Where do you see the change coming? How could a change be come about? Would they just have to start getting feeling better about the world and wanting to help the world, or how could this change possibly come about?
Well,
We can write them and we can communicate with them.
it's interesting because, like, Larry Fink wasn't terribly concerned about the environmental crisis.
Ah.
He's become a little more aware of it, I think, in the last 5 years, and seems to be more concerned about it. But they collectively have like 400 billion invested in the oil companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're making huge returns on the oil companies. He would like them to be thinking about what World Economic Forum calls, like a better capitalism, stakeholders capitalism, meaning that they should be concerned about all issues, including the environment and government policies and that. But it hasn't made much difference in terms of global inequality at all. And to my concern is that this concentration of wealth has continued to be concentrated, expanded. It just creates a barrier to building human betterment and eliminating inequality. We're never going to completely eliminate inequality, but we can certainly make life possible for every human being. The Chinese have a philosophy called Chao Chun, which means moderate living for all. And that's kind of the philosophy it's actually Taoist and a philosophy for the Communist Party. And they have implemented that in terms of getting their poorest people to a level of survival. And if they can do it, we could do it. And I think we must.
The book Titans of Capital, I think I have my answer. Who should read this? It sounds like everybody should read this book.
Well, I certainly would agree with that statement. But certainly people who are in positions of influence and power need to understand who are the people that make these decisions.
Yeah.
They invest 100 billion in tobacco. Tobacco kills 8 million people a year worldwide. And they invest in 60 billion in alcohol, which is the profits from alcohol come from, in the U.S., they come from the 20 million alcoholics and who drink 74 drinks a week on average.
Wow.
And so they're buying half the booze. It is alcoholism supported. And so these are negative consequences for society. Tobacco, alcohol. The U.S. has more firearms per capita than anywhere else in the world. So people are shooting each other at higher rates. And the Titans are fully invested in the small arms manufacturers, let alone all the weapons manufacturers worldwide.
Worldwide, yeah.
So a war like the war in Ukraine, it increases stock values of their investments in military companies by 10 to 20%. And they lost some money in Russia because of the restrictions about U.S. investing in Russia today, but it was more than offset by the capital gains in the war industry.
Yep, amazing. So this book could first of all, it could be a guide to wake us up, wake a lot of us up who had no idea that there's this concentration of wealth. But also, you name names and companies that are holding that wealth. Now you talk about China. Are they doing something there to loosen up the wealth, the concentration of wealth? You said maybe that people in China doubled the rate of the lowest income.
Well, yeah, they have doubled the level of they've eliminated extreme poverty. They still have poverty. I mean, living on $5 a day is not great, but half the world lives on less than six,
Yeah.
and 80% of the world lives on less than $10 a day.
Yeah.
So if you are making 20,000 a year, you're in the upper
Upper.
10% of society of the world. And so that is manifested, and we have a big working class in the U.S., although it's somewhat being undermined by these policies. The Chinese have an expanding working class. So they got families that have homes and cars and go on vacations, and millions now, which really didn't exist before. The difference between China and the U.S. is the Chinese Communist Party runs the country, and the billionaires have nothing to say about it. Whereas in the U.S., the billionaires, after Citizens United, all can contribute to whatever party they want and whatever candidates they want, and that makes candidates obligated to money. And in China, it's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
So of course, the U.S. ideology is that the communists are totalitarian dictators that want to take over the world and kill and destroy everybody. And so that, of course, that's their agenda. Their agenda is to protect private capital. And as that becomes increasingly concentrated, I think it's going to be harder for them to justify.
Yeah.
And writing this book was an effort in that direction to say, whoa, guys, you got to slow this down. You got to start sharing some of this wealth. We've got to eliminate extreme poverty in the United States and the world. And it's all quite doable. There's more than enough resources for that to happen. So let's make it happen.
Yeah. And what's not letting it happen is that concentration of wealth driving policy, especially here in the United States, all levels of government, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Peter, I could talk about this all day long. I find it fascinating. Like I told you, I'm a nonfiction guy. I read nonfiction books, so this is right. I'm kind of a nerd for this stuff. So this kind of stuff I would read, but I hope everybody reads it. And by the way, where can they find the book? Usual places?
Well, Project Censored is one of the co-publisher. So I encourage people to order it through projectcensored.org. But it's available in all bookstores and all the big online places. It came out on the 17th of this month, and
Nice.
Of September. So it's just recently out, and there's, I can tell, doing really well. We're in the top 10 of Amazon's political economy books.
Nice.
So we're feeling pretty good about that.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Peter. I'm not going to go buy a copy. I'm going to buy 10 copies. I'm going to hand this out to some people that should be reading this. And we're really out of time, but any last thoughts for our viewers about the book or anything in the world you want to talk about?
Well, just thank you very much for having me on. I wrote this out of a dedication to trying to make humankind a better place for people. I'm a political sociologist, so that's my motivation. And I will continue to promote this idea of humanitarian betterment for all human beings.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Peter. Author Peter Phillips. What a fascinating book and fascinating and important subject in the world right now. For our viewers, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with another author.
Thank you very much, Mike.
All right, Peter.